Joining me now is House Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Missouri Congressman Jason Smith. Mr. Chairman, you and a couple of Republican lawmakers just visited El Salvador, and you toured the prison holding the deportees. Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer rejected House Democrats' request for a congressional delegation to go to El Salvador. But I do want to hear about your trip. Do you think that Democrats should be able to see what's going on, or do you agree with Mr. Comer, Chairman Comer, that enough is enough with the taxpayer-funded trips?
The reason why we were down there was a trade delegation for Central and South America. If you've noticed, the Ways and Means Committee is in charge of all trade policy. And of course, there's a few things called tariffs that's being discussed globally. And so we were meeting with a lot of the finance and trade ministers. But while we were in El Salvador, we also wanted to see the prison. There's been a lot of discussion of whether it's safe, what is it like. And so the El Salvador government allowed all of us to go through the facility. And I'll tell you, going through that facility, I've been through numerous U.S. prisons. This is much different. This is a terrorism confinement center. And while we were there, there was two different MS-13 gang members that we spoke to within their cells. One was originally deported from Highland Park, California, who told us that he had killed 6 people while in the United States. And then there was another one deported from Northern Virginia. These are terrorists according to Donald Trump's designation, and they're in the right place right now in El Salvador.
That is fascinating and sad and disturbing at the same time, Congressman. And to be clear, by the way, Abrego Garcia was moved from CCOT. So that development happened as well over the weekend and confirmed. But let's move back to the business here at home with you, because lawmakers now are rushing to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act before it expires at the end of the year. There's this new study finding how much money President Trump's tax bill really saved Americans back at the time in 2017. Filers that earn between $50,000 and $75,000, they save more than $4,500. Those who made up to $100,000 save nearly $6,000. Those who made up to $200,000 save nearly $10,000. Republicans are still, though, considering and trying to figure out how to pay for this. Here's the tough part, right? So one plan that's being considered would roll back the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion for the working poor. A group of 12 House Republicans sending a letter to Speaker Johnson warning they're not going to vote for a reconciliation package that includes steep Medicaid cuts that would impact vulnerable populations. But I had Congressman Austin Scott on in the last hour, and what he told me was, let's be clear about what this discussion is with regards to Medicaid cuts. He said it's not a cut. He said basically we want to pull back on the amount of money the federal government gives to states for Medicaid programs. Right now it's 90%. He's like, we would still cover a lot of it. It could be 70-30. But, we're not saying we're going to cut Medicaid. Does that, do you think, change the conversation and maybe the posturing from some of your Republican colleagues who say you can't cut Medicaid?
As you're aware, we have one of the smallest majorities in the history of America. And so we have to thread this needle to pass this one big, beautiful bill. And the president has been crystal clear. He's not going to cut benefits to people on Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. And the big, beautiful bill that we send to the president's desk has to address that. Are there reforms within those programs that can be included in this bill that will cut fraud, waste, create more efficiencies? Absolutely. And you can do that without cutting benefits. We have to make sure we deliver on this one big, beautiful bill. If we do not, Americans will face the largest tax increase in the history of America. On average, 207 million taxpayers will see a 22% tax increase. That is the last thing they need right now after they've seen an inflation tax of over 20% in the last 4 years in the Biden administration.
Well, we got a note from J.P. Morgan this morning talking about the fact that the effective tax rates for Americans is going to jump under the tariff negotiations. But I want to bring in Liz Peek. She's got a question for you, sir.
Good morning, Congressman. One of the ways that Republicans apparently can get around this problem with Medicaid and the fact that some of their congressional districts have a great many Medicaid recipients is by reinforcing or putting back in place the work requirement. The work requirement was always incredibly lenient. You didn't actually have to have a full-time job, but you had to do something in the way of job training or volunteering to be available or have Medicaid available to you. Is that something that you're looking at? Because that seems to be like a pretty sensible outcome here.
Absolutely. The work requirement provides efficiencies. Able-bodied, healthy adults required to work in order to have those benefits. We did that in the TANF program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, under the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2 years ago. It's something that we're looking directly on as well with Medicaid.
I do want to ask you about this as well on the business side. President Trump and Republican lawmakers are considering raising the corporate tax rate, creating a 40% tax bracket for millionaires to pay for all of Trump's desired tax cuts. Listen to what Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Mueser told me on the program last week. Watch.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act under President Trump brought it to 37 for those just on income levels over $750,000, I think it is. So by bringing it from the 37 as we're redoing the tax plan to perhaps 38.6, right? It would still be 1% less than it was before. Right? So if you were to bring it up at one point, it brings about $15 billion in revenues. So if it did come up to 39, it's almost $25 billion. The president is determined not to have a standard, and this is my view from what I based upon him. I'm not putting words in his mouth, a standard Republican-style budget. What he wants to see is something that is in the interest of all of America, middle-income America, small business.
Congressman, do you support a hike, like a millionaire's tax? Do you support raising the corporate tax rate?
What I'll say right now is that we're looking at everything in the tax code, and we're going to provide a tax code that creates growth. It's pro-small business, pro-family, pro-worker. If we do nothing, that top tax rate will go from 37% to 39.6%. We need to make sure that U.S. companies can compete with the rest of the world. The 199A provision, that's a small business deduction for all the pass-throughs, that typically 27 million small businesses are in that top rate. Right now, if Congress does not act, they will see their taxes go up from roughly 23 to 25% to 43.4%. We are focused on a pro-growth tax bill that benefits workers, families, farmers, and small businesses, and that's exactly what we'll deliver.
The problem, though, with the pro-growth policies, and I agree that is the goal, is that we're seeing a slowing economy. But I just want to clarify with you, you would be willing to potentially vote if the corporate tax rate was raised, say from 21 to 25.
So the corporate tax rate, there's been zero discussions about being raised. What has been discussed by news media, not within Congress, but by news media, is that they might increase the top tax rate. What I've said all along is that we're looking at every tax provision, every single tax provision, and we're looking at what makes a tax code pro-growth, pro-worker, pro-family. We're going to eliminate no tax on tips. We're going to eliminate tax on overtime. We're going to give tax relief to seniors. These are things that 77 million Americans voted for. It's what we'll deliver on.
You mentioned, though, the slim majority in the House right now, even with Elise Stefanik coming back into the fold. How confident are you that you can get something done by, say, June?
Failure is not an option. We have to deliver for the American people. I've been pushing aggressively for this one big, beautiful bill starting last Congress. We've been preparing for this moment. We will deliver it. It's not going to be easy. We have to thread a needle. Just a couple no's can kill the bill, but we're going to stand together and deliver for the American people.
All right, we're going to be watching. Real quick before you go, by the way, Pope Francis passed away this morning. He was 88 years old. Do you have any thoughts about that, sir, before we go?
You know, it's really sad. My prayers are with our friends in the Catholic Church. I was raised by a minister, not Catholic, but I can remember when Pope Francis came and spoke to a joint session of Congress. I'll never forget that day. It was a blessing, and our prayers are with the Catholic community and the entire world.
Congressman Jason Smith, great to have you on the program this morning. Thank you for being here.